Defending his record. 2 years after Haitian President Michel Martelly took office, he says his country is on the right track. But where do things stand under his leadership? Plus, how a US tax scandal might now help political groups cheat the system and harm government oversight. You're watching Inside Story Americas from Washington. Hello, I'm Shihab Rutansi. Haiti's president says that under his leadership, the country is attracting foreign investment and seeing job growth. But more than 40% of Haitians are without work, and labor activists say the number is in fact much higher.
If people find jobs, they are just temporary jobs or jobs that are not paying well, they're not decent, they're not sustainable. That wouldn't help any kind of sustainable development in the country.
Meanwhile, 300,000 Haitians are still living in tent camps like this one. Thousands of families have left, but often as a result of being forcibly evicted from public and private property. And most have nowhere else to go. The government says it does not condone forced evictions, but a recent report by Amnesty International says it has failed in its duty to protect its people. Earlier I spoke to the Haitian Consul General in Miami. I put Amnesty's criticism to him.
The reality of the matter is that after the earthquake, we had about 1.5 million people living in situations under tents that are, by many standards, inhumane. The government is very proactive and has been very proactive in trying to find a home for 1.5 million people living under tents. And through a program called 16-6, meaning we have chosen 16 camps, 16 tent camps to relocate into 6 different neighborhoods. We've been able to relocate about 1.2 million people. And it's not an eviction process. By no means is it an eviction process. On the contrary, we're taking people that are living in inhumane conditions and putting them back into homes with a year's stipend to pay for rent, or we're giving them a stipend to fix their homes that were damaged if it's a home that is
With respect,
fixable.
Consul General, and there is a section in the report about the 16-6 programs, and actually it does actually mention it, and Amnesty does welcome the 16-6 program, although it does point out some problems with that. But what we're specifically talking about here are forced evictions, what Amnesty calls a pattern of forced evictions, either carried or condoned by the authorities, often using violence.
Violence is by no means a use to try to put people in more humane situations. Many of those sites that people were living on tents were also sites that were on private property. But that's besides the point. The reality of the matter is we have too many people living in inhumane situations, and we're trying to find a sustainable and humane living situation for as many people as we can.
Amnesty says that the violence is actually being perpetrated by landowners, local officials, municipal agents and police officers. That's harassment and violence. And also those being forcibly evicted have no due process as required by Haitian law and international law.
We definitely do not condone any violence on any of our citizens in Haiti. And if landowners sometimes try to take matters in their own hands, we refer to them to the proper authorities to help them really resolve this matter.
I suppose the suspicion,
besides all of this,
the suspicion has always been though that the government turns a blind eye because actually it's these landowners who are Michel Martelly's base in the end. It's not the internally displaced.
Michel Martelly's base, the president's base, is the people of Haiti. We won this election to give the leverage and the power back to the people. This is a country that has been able to put 1.3 million children to school for free. This is a country that for the first time in its history has established a social network-based, a social safety net to help people that are living under $1 a day, which is about 52% of the population. This is a government that has done more in 2 years than any other government in the past. The reality of the matter is Michel Martelly's base is the people.
I'm joined from New York by Kim Ives. He's a journalist and editor with Haiti Liberté. And we also have Adete Akwe, the managing director for government relations at Amnesty International. What might be useful at this point, actually, is to have a little bit more of the information contained in the report. First of all, though, more than 3 years after the devastating earthquake that left 2.3 million people homeless, displaced families are still struggling for access to clean water, healthcare, schools, and basic services. In addition, more than 16,000 families have been forcibly evicted from private and public lands. Now, Amnesty International found that the majority of those evacuations were carried out using intimidation and violence by those claiming to own the land or landowners reclaiming properties. After being evicted from makeshift camps, families have been given no legal guarantees or alternate housing, and 21,000 more families have been threatened with forced eviction. Adete Akwe, though, we heard the Consul General there say, look, there are housing programs in place. Yes, there may be problems with people taking the law into their own hands, but those will be dealt with by the government. They're certainly not condoned.
Yes, the Council's response, I think, is a little bit disappointing because it's actually the government's obligation and responsibility to protect the rights of the citizens of the country. And if the people in these camps are reporting to us and to journalists that they are being forcibly moved, their belongings are being destroyed, they're not being given adequate consultation, and certainly no effort was made to try to reach some kind of common agreement about where to relocate, then the government is not meeting its international obligations, which it should be doing.
Is there any recourse that they have, though, if they are forcibly evicted? I mean, what does happen to them?
Well, this is the problem, because there's been a lack of clarity and implementation by the Haitian government itself. And, you know, I think everyone understands that they have great challenges and limited resources, but one would have hoped that these people who are desperate would have been treated a little bit more humanely.
What about the rest of the resettlement process? I mean, the Consul General mentioned the 16-6 program. How are the official channels of resettlement going?
I think those, we would have to say, are proceeding along well. You know, they're slow, but they're welcome developments. I think that the test is going to be whether the implementation continues and whether there are more resources and transparency.
Right. So, I mean, the Consul General mentioned then people get a stipend for a year. What happens after that then?
Then they're still left on their own, to their own devices.
Any so public housing policy being planned? I mean, there is a housing policy.
There is a housing policy, and that is actually a major step forward. The housing crisis precedes the earthquake. Right. There was a deficit of about 700,000 units even before. So this is clearly going to take a long time, but the Haitian government should be commended for at least taking some steps forward.
Right, but the national housing policy doesn't seem to have any provision for low-cost social housing, as far as I could see. It's just public. It's just a private enterprise, basically.
That's right. And so the people who have the least money are still going to be the most desperate in this new system.
All right. Kim Ives, then, as we look at the first 2 years of Michel Martelly's rule, how representative, then, do you think are the sort of issues we've been hearing here as regards housing and internally displaced people in Haiti?
I think it's very representative. I think the government has, as we heard from the Consul General, come with a lot of figures which the people say are completely unfounded, are completely bluff, as they say in Creole. The 1.3 million kids in school. Just a couple of weeks ago, Martelly said that he'd created in 2 years 400,000 jobs. So people call it the government à l'oral, that is, of all talk. In fact, there was a musician who made a song called that, à l'oral, and he was in fact personally by Martelly prevented from taking part in the carnival. So this really gives you a notion of what kind of government we have here, where they they talk a good game. They get 10 out of 10 for propaganda and publicity, but in the real facts on the ground, it's something else entirely. And I think the housing situation shows that.
But as Adotei Akwe pointed out, I mean, the housing problems predated the earthquake and Martelly. I mean, Haiti's always suffered from enormous problems. I mean, in 2 years, what did you expect, I guess, is the question.
Well, yeah, but the corruption is out of control. I mean, even people in Martelly's inner circle are jumping ship. People like Richard Morse, his cousin, the manager of the Olafson Hotel, who was a big booster of Martelly in the beginning, had basically quit because of corruption. The finance minister, Marie-Carmel Jean-Marie, quit a couple of weeks ago, apparently because Martelly came to her with a bill for his carnival that he held for his second anniversary, something that's never been done in Haiti. Essentially, they paid people 1,000 gourds, that's about $25 a head, to come out and, to this affair, which was in real counterpoint to the march a week earlier that came spontaneously and very emotionally around former President Jean-Bertrand Aristide after he left the court. So basically you have this artificial crowds created and I think that a lot more could have been done, and the corruption, as I was saying, is over the top.
I mean, I remember when he was inaugurated, many said, look, he's just going to be the puppet of the old baby dog Duvalier oligarchy that have always ruled Haiti, except perhaps during the Aristide period. I mean, has he gone beyond that at all, then?
No, I think it's very much, it's the same program that we saw under Jean-Claude Duvalier. Haiti is open for business, which is the slogan of the Martelly government. That was the slogan of the Jean-Claude Duvalier government. Their same emphasis is on sweatshops and tourism for development. I mean, it is the three roches de feu, as they called it, the three foundations of the Lavalas movement that came in the 90s after Duvalier were justice, participation, and transparency. And we see none of those in Duvalier's. In Martelly's Haiti,
all right.
These things are being trampled.
Adotei Akwe, I mean, Amnesty comes out with this very critical report. We hear the various allegations that Martelly's government is corrupt. And in fact, the whole economic program perhaps is simply just out of the playbook of Duvalier and is just a sweatshop economy. What should the international community be doing? They are in the end funding much of this.
The international community is also, I think, to be criticized for the failure of their intervention. I mean, while it was laudable, the response after the earthquake, the pressure to try to make this government meet the obligations that Kim referred to rebuild transparency. For example, the trial of Jean-Claude Duvalier. Where is that going? Is it going forward? Those are things that the international community can play.
But they're also the major sponsors of this Building Haiti Back Better program of basically of sweatshop economies. We've done programs on the Caracol Industrial Park, for example, and already evidence of exploitation of workers, environmental degradation.
Which is exactly why we need the donors to themselves be held to the same standards as we're looking for in the Haitian government. And I think that's really where Haitian civil society has been so frustrated about this lack of integrity and credibility in rebuilding Haiti back better than it was before.
But Kim Ives, we're back to the age-old question about Haiti. Is democracy part of the international community's plan for Haiti in building it back better? Where does Lavalas and Aristide and the others and the popular movements, what place do they have in the economic future of Haiti as far as they're concerned?
Well, I think we can see it from the election of Martelly, which was illegal. The Provisional Electoral Council, which is under the Haitian Constitution the final arbiter of Haitian elections, was completely sidelined in the November 2010 and March 2011 election that brought Martelly to power. Basically, Washington and the OAS intervened in a sovereign Haitian process, political process, and shoehorned into power Martelly. He was not even in the runoffs, and they insisted that he be, and that former President Préval's candidate be kicked out. So essentially he's in illegally. It was less than 25% of the electorate that voted, which is a record low not just for Haiti but for the entire hemisphere over the past 60 years. So basically he came in I could say, at the behest or due to the intervention of the international community. So the mess we see, to me, we can lay on their doorstep to a large extent.
Kim Ives, thank you very much. Adete Akwe, thank you as well.
Thank you.
Now, the US Justice Department has launched an investigation into revelations that the country's federal tax agency, the Internal Revenue Service, targeted conservative groups. The IRS apologized to the groups after it revealed that it used terms like Tea Party or Patriots to seek them out for extra scrutiny. President Barack Obama called the actions intolerable, and two leading Republicans suggested that criminal acts may have been committed. But what's really at stake with this controversy? I'm joined by Marcus Ernst. He's the former director of the Exempt Organizations Division of the IRS. And from Berkeley, California, we have Daniel Newman, the executive director of MapLight, an organization dedicated to revealing money's influence on politics. Daniel Newman, first of all, then, as things stand, does this appear to have been a politically motivated persecution of right-wing groups?
The evidence has not come out for that. So far, the evidence, there hasn't been political pressure on the right-wing groups. But I think what this exposes is the larger scandals about the IRS complete failure to enforce the law, which is letting groups engage in political activity when they're really not supposed to under the tax code.
All right, well, we'll develop some of those ideas in a moment, but perhaps it's useful at this point just to go into the definition of a 501c4 in a little bit more detail. The IRS defines 501c4s as organizations whose primary mission is advocating for, quote, social welfare. Like charity organizations, they don't have to pay taxes on donations they receive. They also don't have to disclose their donors. These organizations are allowed to lobby on a particular issue, but their primary focus cannot be political. Between 2010 and 2012, the number of applications for 501c4 status doubled to more than 3,300. And that was partly due to a 2010 Supreme Court decision. That ruling gave corporations, unions, and other associations the ability to spend unlimited funds on political activities. Marcus Ernst, the key appears to be then the definition of a 501c4 and whether an organization can meet the requirement for tax exemption. So we're very fortunate to have the director of the Exempt Organizations Division here. With respect, it's part of the problem here that there's a great deal of woolly language involved in these definitions.
Well, that's certainly the case. The concept of a social welfare organization as exempt from tax actually first appeared in 1913 in a tariff act that was enacted that year. It's even older than the Internal Revenue Code, in other words. And it has never been defined with great precision. It has generally been interpreted to be an organization something like a charity in that it provides a community benefit or a community good, but it does so in a way that perhaps has a component that takes it out of the charitable class. That is, it may be slightly more commercial in nature, perhaps in the way it does business. Its focus may not be completely focused on charitable beneficiaries, but on perhaps a more broader class.
And as far as politics is concerned and party politics, it is allowed to take part in elections, but not have its primary function as party political.
That's correct.
I mean, this didn't seem to be a great big issue in US politics until quite recently. Take us back to 2010 when members of the Cincinnati office of the IRS decided, hang on, there's something going on here. Perhaps we need to take a closer look at these 501c4 organizations, or the sudden spike in applications that was coming in.
Yeah, so the U.S. Supreme Court decided 3 years ago in the Citizens United case that corporations, including 501c4 groups, any group really could spend an unlimited amount of money on political activity. So suddenly the IRS saw a jump in applications from groups who sought to engage in political activity through the 501c4 legal structure, with the primary advantage to some of these groups that none of these groups have to disclose who their donors are. So the Supreme Court decision opened up this part part of tax law as essentially a loophole where organizations could engage in political activity without disclosing where the money comes from.
So that's why it became so interesting then. I mean, because perhaps, although now that they had the ability to spend unlimited funds on politics, they didn't necessarily want to be seen to be doing so.
Exactly. So this has become the preferred channel for donors who want to influence elections but want to keep their identities secret. And that had not been possible before the Citizens United decision.
When we look at the spike, though, in applications, was it mainly organizations on the right who were applying for tax-exempt status? Or, I mean, clearly there must have been left-wing organizations, or well, perhaps not left-wing, but Democratic Party-affiliated organizations.
Yeah, I don't think an analysis has come out yet about the proportion of organizations that apply, but certainly groups on the left and the right and the middle have sought to use this section of the tax code to spend on political activity while disclosing their, while hiding their identity.
Right. So, Marcus Owenson, isn't it the IRS's job then to be checking very carefully that the system isn't being gamed, that organizations with a primarily party political focus aren't pretending to be social welfare groups?
Absolutely. I mean, that is the charge that Congress has given to the Internal Revenue Service. That is to make sure that organizations that are applying for tax-exempt status meet the requirements for that status. And that when you're dealing with an organization that is undertaking possible political activities, that involves an exchange of questions and answers, attempting to provide some clarity.
So, I mean,
activities.
As a veteran, as someone who vets these organizations, I mean, is there a sense that perhaps maybe these Tea Party groups were the most visible then? So it was like a bit of a shortcut, perhaps, to try and figure out, well, this might be a good place to start looking if you feel...
That appears to be the case. After all, they did call themselves with a title using the word party, which suggests political party. They were very visible on radio and television and on the streets. So I think that identity and that method of operation attracted attention to them. But the IRS also saw applications from other types of groups that had different kinds of names on both the left and the right.
But is there a suggestion that there were, I guess we don't really know. I mean, this is for the DOJ to figure out, the Department of Justice to figure out whether there was a particular focus on right-wing groups. In the meantime, though, this is where things are a bit perplexing, Daniel Newman, because the Cincinnati office then is going after these perhaps small fry who may or may not be gaming the system. Meanwhile, quite overtly in some ways, these enormous 501(c)(4)s are run by Karl Rove and the Koch brothers and others, which are pretty explicitly trying to influence the political process primarily. So why isn't the IRS going after them, perhaps?
Well, it's inexplicable to me why they haven't. I mean, you take American Actions Network, which is a group that claimed in its IRS filing that it would spend less than 20% of its money on political activity, yet went on to spend 2/3 of its money on political activity. The complaints were filed by the watchdog group Crew, Campaign Legal Center, about other groups that are obviously groups that have a primary purpose to run misleading ads to influence elections, yet the IRS has not taken action.
So, Marcus Owens, perhaps you can give us some insight. Why isn't the IRS going after those quite overt?
Well, actually, you really can't conclude that the IRS isn't doing anything, and that's because, well, first of all, there's a general privacy rule in the Internal Revenue Code that prevents the IRS from confirming whether they are conducting a review either in the application context or in the audit context of any particular taxpayer. So we really don't know. What we do know, though, is, for example, Crossroads GPS did file an application. That's Karl Rove's organization. Did file an application for exemption. We know that because the IRS mistakenly released that pending application to a U.S. media organization known as ProPublica.
Right. I think
so we know that Karl Rove's group is being reviewed by the IRS.
Karl Rove claimed half of its money would be spent on education, 20% on research, and only 30% on policy. And in fact, it spent $70 million on the election.
And I'm confident he's having to explain that as we speak to
But are you confident now? In the wake of this scandal, the question is how reluctant will the IRS be now to actually hold some of these organizations, which at least prima facie look like they're flouting the 501c4?
That's a very good question. The impact of the Department of Justice investigation has to be a chilling one on IRS employees, and I would expect there to be at least a hiatus in the review of these cases.
So that's probably the significance of the story.
I think that's right. The question is going to be how significant is that hiatus going to be and how extended?
Just at the time when there's unlimited funds for political purposes. Interesting.
Exactly.
Marcus Owens, thank you very much. Daniel Newman, thank you very much as well. And that's all from the team in Washington, D.C. for now.